I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. I got to get my voice here as well. I'm glad to be here, though. I'm glad to have this program and this platform to kick it with friends of mine about whatever's on our minds. Thursday, I call this the companions, and different people join us from different places. Like today, our brother Yogi Sena, Mestre Yogi Sena, is joining us from Bahia in Brazil. And my colleague and friend, partner, Ndugu Yusef Mgeni here in St. Paul. Others will be in over the course of the program. But we're really glad that you're with us as well. What we want to do, we're trying to set some goals to rebrand and relaunch this program and its elements for 2023. And we have a particular interest in growing our YouTube presence. So today and every day from now on, you'll hear me asking you, any viewer, any person that knows somebody, to tell somebody to subscribe to our channel, the Insight News YouTube channel. We want to grow. Our short-term goal is to get 1,000 subscribers. We're just starting this, so it's brand new. And the question is, how fast can we do it? We really want to go far, far, far beyond that, but we're going to take baby steps, little steps. So anything you can do to tell some friends, neighbors, that they can subscribe and like and share. I'm asking you to do that. I think this is going to be a fun ride. We're going to develop something that is significant. What I like about it is the fact that we've got this relationship with our brother Yogi and our brother Jesus Chucho Garcia, who's in Venezuela, and other people who are around the world that join this conversation. And it gives us a chance to put a different box, a different context around the problems. You know, too often when we are confronting what we confront daily, it's as if the world is on our shoulders and micro-focused on our next step, our next breath, and we feel isolated, right? But there's power in knowing that we are part of a family of humanity, of African people, of Black people all over the world, and all of us, more or less, are navigating daily and historically in the sense of legacy, and in a way that's, at the end of the day, positive, sometimes painful, but productive, because we're still here and we're still growing. And I think to the degree that we can know each other and figure out how common our joy is, it'll help us navigate the pain and smilingly walk into futures that are beneficial, positive, and that allow our best creative selves to exist and thrive. Well, with that, let me bring in my partners, brother Yusef Mgeni. How you doing, man? Brother
Very good, my brother. Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Yeah, what's on your mind, man? What's
Have you talked about the Jerry Jones photo in earlier program?
Have not. Why don't you bring it up?
Well, in last week, the Washington Post, November 23rd, to be exact, published a photo from 1957 with about 100 white students at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, blocking the entrance of 9 African-American students who had been admitted to the school. And in the audience was a sophomore who at that time was 14 years old by the name of Jerry Jones. Now, for people who are unfamiliar with Mr. Jones, he is the owner and the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys football team.
Mm-hmm.
He made a $500,000 contribution to the Republican governor of Texas in this latest election, but has held private meetings with his players, indicating that there will be no politics displayed by Dallas Cowboy NFL members.
Mm-hmm.
He also had built, just for the exclusive use of himself and the Dallas Cowboys, a 70,000 seat football stadium. And so here's 14-year-old Jerry Jones in this crowd of about 100 white male students. I don't know that I saw any females, blocking the entrance of these non-black students to Central High School in 1957. Now, in addition to the Washington Post article, LeBron James was interviewed after the Lakers won a game, and they peppered him with the usual array of questions all over the map. And LeBron expressed his disappointment to the media that he had not been asked about the photo with Jerry Jones, and went on to comment that, Kyrie Irving, Kanye West, what's the brother's name who took a knee? Colin Kaepernick.
Yep.
That for weeks they peppered him every day. Is this how black people feel? Aren't you going to make an angry rebuttal? And what's your personal take? He said, but I'm disappointed that no one has asked me about the Jerry Jones photo. And said, anytime that a black athlete or a black person does something that the white media considers outrageous, that he and other black athletes who enjoy a significant following are just peppered and peppered and peppered continuously. But when it is one of their own who is involved in an egregious, monstrous act and atrocity, that it quickly disappears. And the Washington Post came out with the article, and that was it. But there's been quite a bit of chatter in the black media and on black podcasts and on black internet programs such as yours. So I think that the point was well taken, that Kanye sort of broke the dam, and then Kyrie Irving, who played for the New York, I think he played for the Nets and the NBA, recommended a documentary from Hebrews to Negroes, and they excoriated him. He had to pay a $500,000 fine, had to make a huge contribution to the Anti-Defamation League, had to meet with them. They had a whole list of conditions that he had to meet. Now, there was no commentary or anything like that related to his referencing this documentary that was on YouTube or somewhere, but very interesting comments, particularly coming from LeBron James, who has a huge following. And I just want to add, LeBron James wrote a check for $70 million to ensure that anybody in his hometown of Akron who graduated from high school and wanted to go to higher education would get a full 4-year ride of room, board, tuition, books, the whole 9 yards, to be able to go to college and stay there for free for 4 years. And I think that is extremely noteworthy because no one has even come close. And a comment was made this morning by Stephen A. Smith on First Take. He said there are not many Curt Floods out there. Curt Flood was the one who was individually responsible for creating free agency in baseball and in other national athletic teams by refusing to allow the team that owned his contract to treat him like he was a slave. So a lot of heat about the Jerry Jones. And finally, when asked about it, Jerry Jones said, well, I was 14 years old. I was only there because I was curious, made no apology, made no comment about how atrocious the act was, how monstrous the times were, or anything related to blocking the admission of these 9 students as just one of 100 white faces surrounding the entrance and refusing to allow these black students who have been legally admitted to this high school to come in and go to class, and pressing Jerry Jones, LeBron James, Stephen A. Smith, Roland Martin, and others, pressing Jerry Jones to come up to the microphone and bite the bullet, and be serious about this in the same way that he was serious about saying there would never be a Colin Kaepernick on his team.
Right.
He would never allow any of his players to demonstrate any kind of political disagreements like that. So now it's your turn, Jerry. Okay, with your 70,000 seat stadium.
Sure. Yoji, what's on your mind, man? Let's bring in also Angela is here, and Jonathan is here, and Dr. Irma is here. Thanks for all of you for being here. Yoji, what's top of mind with you? And then we'll go to Angela and Dr. Rose and Jonathan.
Yes, greetings everyone. Thank you for being here. Well, I was reading the same thing that brother Yusef was talking about this commentary of LeBron James about the double standard that is always going. You know, it is. I don't know. It's every time the kind of the same stuff. This double standards or what it is that's chosen to catch the attention. Over here in Brazil, w- as far things interesting is going on, was one that just there's two or three things. Two of them happen in Qatar, and you guys are familiar with Gilberto Gil, the singer Gilberto Gil, the intellectual Gilberto Gil, and he also was Minister of Culture in the government of Lula. He played several times in Minneapolis. He was Bob Marley buddy and stuff like that. And he was hostilized in Qatar by the Brazilian crowd that was attending the World Cup. And he's an 80 years old guy, of the most sweet kind of person that there is. And he was, screamed at and disrespected and cussed at in the World Cup by those middle class white people from the south of Brazil. The Wow, there's a lot of noise going on. um, the other thing is, still there's people who are refusing to accept the outcome of the elections, and so there is insurgent people. They are doing ridiculous scenes. They're being camped in front of military quarters. Uh, like the whole circus, and some of them kneeling, praying, and begging the military to intervene. And there is a lot of rumors that supposedly the army is in the street in some cities, but of course, uh, in the mainstream media doesn't mention any of those things, but does mention the resistance of Bolsonaro in many ways to accept. So what he did for the last 30 days of his government, he cut the funds for education. Like all of a sudden, all the universities are in trouble uh, up from now on because they don't have funds. As well was the police, federal police, and he cut the funds to Congress because he used to have majority in the Congress, and that majority already uh, negotiated with Lula for the new status quo, and he felt betrayed. So he have retaliated, also withdrawing the funds to Congress as he did to education. And the other side, uh, one of the things that is notorious, and we be talking not vehemently, it is the absence of black people in Lula's team, unless, of course, it is the Commission for Racial Equality or Culture or things like that. So it is something that the Bolsonaro people do point that, you know, we black people and the people of Northeast voted mostly, and we are the responsible for the victory of Lula, but we are very little represented visually
Hmm.
in his cabinet. There is one or other black people, but there is not ostensive presence of
Let me bring Angela in. Angela, how are you, my friend? Good to see you. What's on your mind? And react to the previous presenters as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here as always. I am definitely thinking about what's going on in Tallahassee this week, where suspended prosecutor Andrew Warren is taking a federal court case to DeSantis for his unfair suspension. So, for those who don't know, Warren is a prosecutor out of Hillsborough County, a state attorney, Hillsborough County state attorney. And he was suspended over a handful of moves that he made and DeSantis suspended him. And so he's a Democrat, and he said that he wouldn't, prosecute the ban on abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And so DeSantis moved to suspend him in August. And he says this is a violation of his First Amendment rights. I also see it as concerning for our democracy because he is an elected official, and the people of Hillsborough County, and then also the people of America generally have the right to vote for who they want as their state's attorney, their prosecutors, their county attorneys, and that's something where him being suspended is an issue for me, and especially around this 15-week abortion ban. And that's what he said he was going to not prosecute. There weren't any cases that he mishandled. It wasn't anything of that sort. It just was a stance that he decided to make. And that is what's gotten him suspended, Bill. He's taking it to federal court.
We lost your audio. We lost your audio. There we go.
He's taking it to federal court. So that's it. That's the story.
All right. Dr. Irma, how are you?
I'm good. I'm here from sunny but cold Rochester, New York.
You've got an exciting project there that you're doing.
Yes. I'm working with Rachel DeGuzman and 21st Century Arts, Inc., which is a Rochester nonprofit. And I'm here in the Black House, which is a venue that 21st Century Arts has in the community for exhibitions. The photographs that appeared in my Daniel Prude article were from an exhibit that was held here. And the project we're doing is Black Rochester Narratives, a community-focused project of preservation and healing. And it's a pilot. And so we're working with some local activists, Black activists who've been very involved in not only nationally, but what's happening in Rochester. And we're going to be videotaping their narratives. They're working with us as community curators to decide, how that information, the products, the results should be disseminated and shared. So it's exciting.
What is happening in Rochester? What are you documenting in particular?
Well, there's a lot that, as I indicated in the Daniel Prude article, that, a lot of events have happened here and don't necessarily make the national news. Daniel Prude actually died 3 months and I think 3 days before George Floyd by asphyxiation with a knee to his chest. There's a lot of underrepresentation and just historic disparities.
Jonathan, how you doing, man?
I am doing great. Excited to be here with everybody. Out of the Thanksgiving food coma, and now looking ahead. So many exciting things happening. The great pieces that everybody else has talked about. I'm looking at the national stage with the Oath Keepers leader getting the seditious conspiracy charge. Convicted on that. So I'm hopeful that is the first of many to come as that proceeds. Looking at the Republican Party turning on Donald Trump and seeing how that will all play out, and especially keeping an eye on Georgia, and amazed at just, the more speeches I hear by Herschel, the more I can't understand why anybody supports or would want themselves to be represented by that. But that's just me.
But what do you think about that? I mean, what's the deal? It's not about him at all, really. Not
No.
about his voice, his thoughts. It's the body, not the mind.
Right.
And the body being one that is a managed body, a managed voice. That's what it's about. And this is like an effort to prove that the power that they seek and have had in the past is still something they control today. That's what I think. What do you think?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm disappointed in the fact that Herschel is playing such into the role that we left behind mostly in the 1920s and the 1930s. I mean, I don't care what political affiliation you are. You can be whatever you want, but you should not be a mouthpiece or a puppet for a group that does not have the best interest of your people in mind, doesn't have the best interest of the state that you want to represent in mind. I'm still trying to figure out how they go ahead and even let him in the election, since his home residence is Texas. But, that's, again, different rules in different places. But this was easily about the fact that he would do whatever he was told and just be a body within the Senate. My belief, however, is that he was riding the coattails of Brian Kemp getting in there, and that those same people are not going to turn out in the same numbers. And that, two, the people of Georgia, as they see more and more of him, as more and more information comes out about how he has treated his children and how he has treated women he's been involved in, and as he gives speeches that go, I like sci-fi as much as the next person, but I have never given a speech about werewolves and vampires on a political stage. So the more he does that, the more I'm hoping people will see how unfit for office he is, and that they can't take a chance on having him represent them, regardless of their political affiliation.
Yusef, you think that? Yeah, Yusef, go ahead.
Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live said he didn't want to say anything derogatory about Herschel Walker because he was black, but then went on to comment that Herschel is clearly observably stupid. Now they're having a runoff election in Georgia next Tuesday. Herschel has been on vacation for the past 6 days, not campaigning.
Right.
And it is further ironic that the initial cries were, we want to maintain control of the Senate for the Republicans. That's why we're voting for Herschel. Well, at this point, the Democrats have the majority in the Senate, regardless of the outcome of this election. So that argument no longer applies. But there are people who would vote for him because he was famous as a member of the Georgia State Bulldogs, the football team. Right. And I think that, they used to say it about Gerald Ford, that he got hit in the head one too many times on the gridiron, and the results are obvious. His CTE may be premature. And Power 96, one of our viewers and listeners indicated that he doesn't believe that Herschel's cornbread is fully baked in the middle. This thing is so bizarre.
Yeah, a friend of mine used to say the lights are on, but nobody's home.
Thank you.
But I wonder if he represents, sort of symbolically, this notion that when you are confronted with critiques, then whites turn around and say, but this black person over here said, and somehow that authenticates what's going on. He reminds me of what I used to call the OJ syndrome, which is that the darling of whites, as long as you are not treading on certain kinds of territories. And
pet Negro.
Yes, they were pet Negro. Yes, I think that was one of Zora Hurston's terms. Yep. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a question of whether this person truly believes what's going on, or if he is allowing himself to be manipulated. But I think it is evidence of the further damage that is being done to this democracy, and that you have people who are intent, without Donald Trump, DeSantis in Florida is dangerous. So to have him as an alternative to Trump is moving the Republican Party in, to me, the same direction. He just is less flamboyant.
Well, he's a clear nominee for the Coon Conductor of the Year award, Dr. Irma.
I love that, Yusef. And I would take it a step further to say that this is what the Republican Party thinks of Black people. And I would challenge anybody to say different, because when you have, they could have picked anybody to represent them. And in full disclosure, Raphael Warnock is a classmate of mine from Morehouse, a friend, and I love the man. But that man has more degrees, more experience, and is pastor of Dr. King's church. I mean, he has everything you need in a representative. So to put somebody like Herschel up against him for the simple fact of trying to gain control and that they can control him represents just how little they think of the African-American community. Amen. Just how little they think of our ability to think, to process, and to go ahead and make decisions and be representative of our communities and serving in a capacity.
And Jonathan, I would sort of say slightly different. It is evidence that they want to win by any means necessary. Yeah. And that it doesn't matter who's in that role as long as they feel they can manipulate that person. And Herschel obviously can be manipulated. And the question is, at what cost? I mean, the numbers were devastating. That was a very close race. That was not, that's what's amazing to me, is how close it was.
What's amazing in the same way that Trump's actual election was devastatingly amazing, because I didn't expect it, though, by polling or voting time, you could see things shifting, but it was still incredulous that America would actually elect Donald Trump president, and it did. And so by the same token, the incredibility of Herschel Walker as a candidate lets you know we're going down the same path. And there are those who are committed to a notion of power and pathways to power, and not at all to democracy, and not at all to recognition of our humanity. For them, I think that our presence in the arena of power is a curiosity. It's like they're looking at a sideshow at a circus. It's cute, but there's no consequence or value that they recognize or want to recognize. They must, because we are now making policy. But given, go ahead, man.
I'm sorry for interrupting. It's interesting that he was handpicked and endorsed by Donald Trump, yet the folks in Georgia have asked Trump not to come into the state for fundraising or any joint appearance with Herschel because they feel it would hurt Herschel's chances in the runoff election. So more evidence of the downhill slide of Donald Trump and everything he represents, and hopefully Herschel Walker with him.
Well, who is in Georgia voting in Herschel Walker?
Who is voting for him?
Yeah,
there is any demographics of who is
the Republicans?
It's whites. I mean, I think that what we're seeing is an attempt to what I call the reclamation of white power. It is an attempt to re-enshrine white supremacy. Angela pointed out, that gerrymandering, voter disenfranchisement are all just, these are mechanisms for reducing the effectiveness of the Black vote. And he is only being put in place by those who have power and privilege and who want someone that they can manipulate so they can reestablish, when Trump talks about going back to America the way it was, the America he wants is where Black folks knew their place. They didn't have the right to vote. They were intimidated and violence used against us when we tried to exercise that vote. That's the America that he wants to bring back, And I don't think DeSantis is any different. He just may look different. He's got a little more class, I guess, or but he's not as confrontational. But he still wants the same thing.
But they also, I'm going back to my point. They could have picked Michael Steele's available, Alan Keyes, Claude Elliott. There's a whole bunch of Black Republicans they could have picked that would be more qualified than a stick.
But this wasn't about qualifications.
I
This
agree
was
with
about
you.
having a Black body. But
Yep.
what you want to do is get the one that doesn't know what's going on. And
They
he
were
got it.
they were also hopeful that it might drain off some of the Black votes because the race is so close.
Yeah, it's a drone. Herschel Walker is a drone.
He's the Jar Jar Binks of the American election system. There you go.
We'll take your word for it.
Yoji, so what's the parallel in Brazil?
The fun thing is, I was thinking to do this parallel is because here voting it's all mandatory, right? And where in the U.S. People go so much out of the way to prevent people to go voting.
Mhm.
Here it's kind of if you don't vote, you have repercussions, right? You cannot like open a bank account, certain things you cannot do. You have to justify why you didn't vote. So,
That's
and go ahead.
it's very interesting. Would that work here, Yusef? Irma, Angela?
Hey, let's try it and see.
Say it
Was that-
again.
Mandatory voting?
Yeah.
That's an
Yeah.
interesting concept.
Mhm.
I think it's a constitutional issue because though folks talk about like voting as your first, an expression of a First Amendment right, you also have the right to not vote, and that
Mhm.
says a lot, right? Like I do think that it would be a constitutional issue raised, and those who benefit from the population not voting will fight tooth and nail for that one. So it would be a tough battle. Do I think that it would be good to have mandatory voting? I don't know, because I also think the moment you tell some communities, and this is nothing about us, but the moment you tell some communities that you have to do something, they're gonna push.
But
not to.
Angela, would you support a literacy
Yeah.
test in order for people to be able to run for office? Because if that were the case, Herschel's name might not be in the media today.
No, I don't think we need to do that. I mean, I think it's evident, that he's not qualified. But I think, Angela, you sort of bump up against rights, versus having something mandatory. Yoji, how do people in Brazil respond? Do they actually go out and vote? And,
No.
Brazil is just
It-
now
It is mandatory, but there is abstention. Like this year election, 20% of the voters abstain. So the consequences, I say there's consequences, but you fix it by paying a fine. That is very little. But one of the tactics of Bolsonaro was to prevent people to get to vote, right? By doing the road blitz with the highway patrol, the federal highway patrol, stopping buses, because the electoral court here determined that the day of the elections, all the public transportation to be free, so as not to have any hindrance of access of people, principally poor people, because of the question of the cost of transportation, or if you live in different municipalities and you have to vote far away. So all this transportation was to be free. So that was how here they tried to manipulate the access to people to vote. But being mandatory doesn't mean that people comply. It is not also that uh, let's say Kafkan way of being. It's part of the law. So you have to have a card when you become legal age. one of the documents that you do, males, for example, you have to go to the draft, and you have to do the voting registration. So it's part of it's in your ID, in your main ID. It is your social security number, where your birth certificate is registered, uh, and says where your voting section. And of course, here you can do everything electronically now with QR code. So you can do vote with QR code. So it is everything to you to vote in
It's
certain way.
easy to do. Question I had, Yuji, was this, to relate these two conversations. Is there a body of Afro-Brazilians who, from what our conversations are, I would expect that they have supported Lula, right, for
Yeah.
the perception of being inclusive and acknowledging the Afro-descendant character of 100 million Brazilians versus um, the Bolsonaro camp, which in my mind is more conservative and white and promoting traditional white um, advantage in the culture in Brazil. So if that's a fair description, are there significant numbers of Black Brazilians who are in the Bolsonaro camp as well? That would be the parallel.
There you find black and poor people that are followers of Bolsonaro. But is I think one factor that also there is in common with people like Bolsonaro, who like people like Trump, who like people like Putin. I think in common, they have some, as you guys saying, you say too, they don't have all the lights on. That I think is something in common with them,
Mhm.
mixed together with bad character, having an innate bad character. So black people who are have also those characteristics, and many times those that uh, ascend socially, they do claim the discourse of the white Brazilians, and they try to behave in certain way as much more for that uh, need of being accepted and
Mhm.
differentiate themselves, like, okay, we arrived, we are not that anymore.
Right.
But internalized racism, doesn't just disappear overnight. People have to struggle and grapple with having generations of being told you're not good enough, you're not worthy. And some people have drunk the Kool-Aid.
What? Dr. Irma, I can't believe that it takes time to get rid of all the. I thought when Barack Obama got elected, that just kind of cleaned the slate and everything was all good. You're telling me it's going to take us generations to undo the damage that has been in this country longer than we've been out of bondage in this country.
That's what we call generational trauma. And that's, we're contending with it. And the less information that kids have in school about, what has really happened in history versus what people want them to believe has happened. People need information to be able to grow, develop, change, evolve. And that is one of the reasons that we're doing this project in Rochester, is to get that information documented, preserved, so that it's available for the future, not just for today, but for future generations. And I think, Al, the shows that you have here, to make sure that they're preserved and stuff, because we don't know how long the YouTube platform is going to last. Twitter
Right.
is teaching everyone a lesson that you
Mhm.
cannot count on these platforms being there forever and ever. How many of you remember MySpace?
Mhm.
Okay,
Or good.
it's no longer, right? Or it's kind of moved to the side. And so, I mean,
Or
I think we,
CompuServe or AOL, was it
yeah,
CompuServe
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that?
is it
MySpace.
Yeah.
at att.net? I mean,
Mhm.
these things come and go. And so we still need newspapers that are print. We still need other places to preserve this content so that we're not relying upon these platforms that somebody buys it out and they decide they want to move in a different direction and your stuff's gone if you haven't if you haven't preserved it. So that's sort of another plea, sort of push for archiving.
Absolutely. I was going to pull up the cover of the upcoming week's Inside News feature story on the new St. Paul police chief, written by Brenda Lyle Gray, and it quotes Yusef extensively. But Yusef, talk about what you said. We were interviewing Tuesday with him. You were on with me Tuesday, I think it was. What change is afoot for the community in this election in particular, and in general, what is the movement of our people around, number one, the challenges of both poverty that generates crime, both drug abuse that generates crime, and dysfunction on the one hand. At the same time, a lot of good things are happening in many sectors of the community, and we often are not able to elevate and further push, accelerate all those good things because we're focused on the things that are painful, and we should, but we shouldn't be immobilized. What do you think?
Well, I love these softball questions that you ask that have a one sentence answer. Uh,
Yes, all
let
right.
me, let me say a couple of things and try and be mindful of the 15 minutes that we have left. The new chief of police in St. Paul is a reflection of the fact that the relationship between the police department and the capital city of Minnesota, St. Paul, has been much, much more open-ended, transparent, accountable, and friendly than the one in one of our suburbs to the west, also known as Minneapolis, where there has been a questionable relationship between the police and the African American community for generations and decades. So Chief Axel Henry negotiated with the St. Paul NAACP for 18 months about the new body worn camera policy in the city of St. Paul. He attends Rondo Days, the Selby Jazz Festival. He was formerly the East Side Commander. He's been in a number of positions within the police department, and he has incredible relationships with people on the ground in their own communities, in low-income communities and communities of color in St. Paul. So when we call, we get a prompt response or an audience or an answer. And, he's a genuinely authentic human being. And I think that, we've been blessed because beginning in the late 90s, we've had Corky Finney, we've had Commander Harrington, we've had Tom Smith, we've had Todd Axtell, and now we have Axel Henry. And all of those police chiefs, the last 5, have had incredible relationships, not just with the African American community, but with the total community, which is a real plus and a real benefit. Whenever there's an officer-involved incident in St. Paul NAACP chapter and leadership in the African American community get a phone call. Okay, whenever there's a termination or our prior chief of police fired 5 officers, we knew about it hours before the actual dismissal actually took place. When Frank Baker was bitten by a police dog and the dog took a chunk out of his leg the size of a large sweet potato, we were allowed to view the video before the information ever became public.
Mhm.
And the chief actually went on the air and apologized to Mr. Baker for what happened and went to visit him when he was hospitalized. So community policing really means something and has teeth in the city of St. Paul. Now, Chief Axel Henry would be the first one to acknowledge that you can't police away some of the challenges that we have in terms of poverty, in terms of affordable housing, in terms of economic development, in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, and the list goes on and on and on. But when the cost of policing for the Selby Jazz Festival went from $3,000 to $10,000 in 1 year, the St. Paul Police Department called on the people who were in the cadet program, the police training program, who were not fully armed police officers, to man the Selby Jazz Festival to lower the cost, to make it more feasible and affordable for the African American community to have the best festival in the city of St. Paul, with 35, 40,000 people, hundreds of vendors, and food trucks for blocks. So the police piece is one that we look forward to continuing the tradition. And I mentioned last week that we've had a compact, we've had, what do they call it in Minneapolis? They're trying to put together, Angela?
Consent decree.
A consent decree since 2001. And we just approved an updated addendum to that agreement because of changes in technology, body cameras, so on and so forth. Now, in terms of what the impact is on poverty and some of those underlying conditions, the police department established a process when going on calls to problem properties of taking a social worker, of taking people from Ramsey County, of taking a building inspector if it's a rental property, to try and identify what kind of peripheral issues were contributing to the challenges that family was facing. It wasn't just a police issue where you go in and write a ticket or arrest somebody or threaten to put people in jail if they don't turn down the noise or stop the partying. You take in a cadre of people. That's true community policing, and look at what are the underlying root peripheral issues that are contributing to this, and by eliminating them, what kind of value-added benefit are we providing for the quality of life of that family? So our police department sees itself as not the solution, but as a part of the solution in concert, in collaboration, and coalition with other human service providers, the God Squad, which goes into African American homes at 2 a.m. in the morning, a group of priests, ministers who want to offset juvenile crime prevention, want to contribute to it. And so our police department really sees itself as a partner with people on the ground in the communities in the capital city of St. Paul. And I think that's the real beginning to having a meaningful relationship that has mutual and value-added benefit. And it's going to take as long to address some of the challenges that you outlined as it has taken for us to slip backwards into the consequences of those challenges: healthcare, education, crime, economic development, domestic abuse, teenage pregnancy, and all of the quality of life indicators where we're at the top of the list when you look at the total community and see who is most impacted. There are no quick fixes or magic bullets or one sentence replies. And as John Coltrane said, I apologize, brother, it just took that long to get it all out.
Angela, jump in, Angela. One of the things you want to talk about is Hakeem Jeffries. What's on your mind regarding him?
Yeah, so he's just been chosen as the replacement for Nancy Pelosi. Also, as we're in this moment of, yes, we've just had an election, there's a number of folks who are running for city council races in St. Paul and Minneapolis and other places. And Shaniqua Johnson is one who's running for Ward 7 in St. Paul, just announced her race today. But Hakeem Jeffries, back to him, he's the first Black, leader of the House, Democrat leader. So I'm excited to see what he does and the work that he puts forward. As you know, there's been a history of kind of like back and forth with Nancy Pelosi when the squad was pressuring her a couple of years ago. There was some backlash to that, but she was able to hold on to power for quite a while when her husband unfortunately was attacked. And, this is also something that, one of these days we should talk about is the danger for elected officials currently. But when her husband was attacked just a couple of weeks ago, she decided to take that step back. And was it already coming and this kind of accelerated it, or was just bad timing? I don't know. Of course, I don't know her personal decisions. But it's a very momentous time for Hakeem Jeffries to take on this role in this new era of democracy. And we'll see how he navigates in steering the ship of the party during this moment when we need more unity than ever to get any of these bills passed.
Angela, do you think that there's going to be challenges for him, the Obama effect where people wanted miracle work? I mean, they expected Obama to come in and just kind of do miracle work. Is the same thing going to be expected, and is it realistic? And particularly as it comes to issues that relate directly to Black people.
I don't think it will be miracles happening. I don't see any miracles coming down the way. I think it will have to be, a real resistance at least, just to make sure that our democracy is safe and that our rights to vote are maintained.
Jonathan, go ahead, Angel. I'm sorry.
I was going to say is that we were talking a few weeks ago about a stacked cabinet for folks who potentially might run in the future for president, and Hakeem is on that list for me. I just hope that he doesn't mess anything up and they don't push him off the glass cliff, to say.
Yes.
Jonathan was going to ask you to respond to that, but also you put in the note, Wakanda Forever is on your mind. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. I think we should talk about that.
With regards to Hakeem, I agree with Angela. I also think that I was having a discussion with some friends. They were noting that now when the Republicans control the House is when Nancy goes ahead and steps aside and turns it over to her brother to have to deal with that. But they forget that we have always been working twice as hard. And so if anybody can do anything with this, it's going to be him. And I'm looking forward to see what he does and the work on that. Wakanda Forever, let me tell you, if you all haven't seen it, I don't know if I can talk about it without spoiling something, so close your ears or something, but you need to go see this film. They did a phenomenal job of picking up the pieces from the tragic death of Chadwick. They deal with it so well in the movie. They deal with the legacy so well. I went and saw it a second time last night with my daughter, and she was like, okay, I need like a week, and then we're going to get back together and talk about it. But I need time to get through this.
Well, tell her to read my 2 articles on badass Black women of Wakanda.
Nice. Well, and I'm working on a piece myself because, it's taken some criticism from some parts with people not really understanding fully what was going on. I had, a friend who was upset that the Wakandans were getting beaten up by the Talakanels. And I pointed out to him, they live at deaths that would crush the human skeleton. So they are naturally stronger, bulletproof and things. So Wakandans, as good as they are going to not physically be the same. And I think that they really did a good job in terms of dealing with grief, in terms of showing what legacy is. And I love M'Baku. M'Baku, his character has been totally revamped from the comic books, and I love what they have done with him, and to see just him being both funny but wise at the same time, and an advisor to Shuri, and Shuri taking on the mantle in the way
Yes.
that she has. I was excited, even before this, at the idea that she would eventually become, but the way they have done this in terms of not just the storyline, but just carrying forward and honoring Chadwick, I think it was marvelous and wonderful. And I love the movie is mostly, women in power doing things, especially with Wakandans. And the way they have revamped Namor as being the Mesoamerican, the Mexican, and the Mayans all together, I think it's a great thing. It's a little bit of an adjustment from what the comic books were, but it's a good adjustment, and it gives a great basis, and it brings in some good culture to the film.
It
I was
also,
relieved. I was relieved actually to see the film because, of course, like from the trailer, it did set up like Indigenous versus African, and that's kind of like the Indigenous American versus African. That was like the premise that I thought that it was going to go through. And of course, without too many spoilers, I'll just say that the nuance in that conversation was very well discussed, and it might have gone over some people's heads, but you have to also realize is that this movie is a new direction in a series of movies in the Marvel universe. And so, they do have their critique of like the CIA and the US government as well.
May I say something?
Please go ahead.
Do you? I watched the movie and I really liked it. But one thing that to me, my point of view, and I don't know if um, the doctor gonna agree with me in certain way. Also, what I see in Wakanda, uh, it's uh, it's ethnocentristic in the way of that is geared, and in the way how America society um, interacts. For example, with the bringing in now of Namor, right, to represent the Latinos or the Mexicans, where it is about these racial synergies of the United States, but in many ways is this character is not represent uh, deeply Pan-Africanism, but in certain ways reflecting or chronicling the race relations or tensions or synergies of the reality of the US, and that's why I would say that's still in certain way very ethnocentric as far as being America at large, how
Yogi,
Americans deal with their culture.
would it have been different if the comic series and if the story originated in Brazil or in Latin America? Would it have been different if the origin of the story was actually an African nation, say if it was South Africa or Ethiopia or Senegal? What do you think would be the difference, if any?
Would be different because the outlook is different.
Mhm.
For example, I have this ability of believing in two words or being able to see, certain things. I after so many years in the U.S., I see things through the lens of an African American, but many times still my Afro Brazilian lens also sometimes superposes, and many times they don't coincide.
and I
You
think, I
know,
think,
for example, the preval
Yogi, that we're,
the
yeah.
Well, I look forward to the review by Angela and Dr. Irma of the Viola Davis movie, Women Warriors.
That'll be great. Well, listen, we're out of time. Good show as always. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to see the Wakanda Forever on Saturday with my grandkids, I think. So I'll let you know next week what my impressions. But I'm excited about it. I love the idea of imagining futures, and I think that's something that we have to spend more of our time doing. Just noodling and doodling in our heads, in our spirits, in our souls, in our scrapbooks. In the stories that we grew up with, and projecting those out 1,000 years or 100 years and imagining that world. And then once we continue to clarify and refine, number one, we demonstrate the expectation that we're going to be here. And then two, we demonstrate that it's possible for us to be planful and to do things today. The first step in the journey of 10,000 miles, that can be our guiding principle and light as we create a world, build a world brick by brick that reflects our sensibility, our sovereignty, our decency, our humanity. Listen, see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, bro.
Forever.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.